The new Molten Core raid has now been cleared in the very first day in Season of Discovery, and today I'm going to break down all of the strategies you need to know for every single encounter to be able to clear it on Heat Level 3. And like we expected, the new boss at the very end of the raid does drop legendaries. It drops a ton of loot, but also it does drop legendaries. So you can see we got a binding from this very last boss, and let's just dive into everything you need to know. First things first, Blizzard did say that in Heat Level 2 and 3, you will need fire resistance gear, and the recommended fire resistance of 96 or higher or 226 or higher for Heat Level 3 is not actually a recommendation. And that's because, as you'll see in a second, if you take one tick of fire damage in one of these heat levels, right here you're seeing me, and I had slightly under the 226 cap, you will get the conflagration debuff, which will then hit you for up to 300,000. We've actually seen it overkill someone for now 1.5 million damage. It is a literal one shot, so you need to be ready to have that fire resistance if you want to go into these raids. Now the first boss is Lucifron, and he comes with his 3 adds, and you're actually going to kind of find this consistent throughout the raid. What you're going to want to do is tank the adds away from the boss himself, so have the adds being tanked off to the side, whereas the boss gets tanked off to another side. He needs to get moved a lot more here, and you'll see it happen in a second, but what the adds do is consistently mind control players around them. You can see this in the background, people are getting mind controlled, and this is a magic debuff that needs to just be dispelled. And if the tank is off by himself, you'll notice as Windforce is pulling the adds over here, he will pretty much be the only one getting mind controlled. So if you instantly dispel this consistently, so just assign one person to only dispel the tank that's tanking the adds, then you should be fine. There is also a decurse that has to happen, which is essentially a curse that goes out on all players, similar to what Lucifron usually does, and it makes you basically not able to cast, or all of your abilities cost more mana. That on top of the last thing, which is essentially a magic debuff he puts, you can see this right here, called Impending Doom, and that needs to be dispelled or it will hit you at the end of this tick for 2,000 damage. It will not kill you. Do not worry, this won't kill you. It's actually not really that scary. You probably aren't even going to end up dispelling it eventually. You're probably going to just end up leaving it on, but that's the simplicity of this fight. Realistically, it's just tank the boss in one side, tank the adds off on their own, and make sure you are dispelling and decursing. The second boss is Magmadar, and you only really need one tank for this fight. He does summon adds, but you really can use one tank. To make it easy, I would have 2 tanks. This boss does an AoE fear every now and then called Panic. When he does this, pretty much everyone gets feared, so if you have Fear Ward or anything else, it's easy to avoid, but just make sure you kind of deal with this and have Fear Ward on your tank. Now, Magmadar does summon these Core Hounds, like I mentioned, and they will add a stacking debuff to the tank that is tanking them. So for now, we have the main tank taking them, and he actually didn't really need to get them off of him. With enough damage, you can just burn the boss. So with world buffs, you'll end up just literally burning the boss. Look at its HP. And on top of that, the boss will throw out these flame patches on the ground, and if you are below the fire res suggestion, you will get that conflagrate I mentioned earlier and just die instantly. He'll also do a flame breath, which isn't too intimidating to be realistic. It's just losing aggro to the fear and watching out for these flame patches on the ground. Ignore the adds, burn the boss. Welcome to MC. That's a pretty consistent mechanic. And if you are a hunter, make sure you are using Trank Shot on cooldown whenever the boss gets enraged or frenzy. And you get Trank Shot from the boss before this, Lucifron, but you need to keep doing this. If there's only one hunter, you cannot use it right as the frenzy happens. It'll be like 4 or 5 seconds after it happens that it goes out. But from there, you should be able to easily take the boss down. Gehennas is another really easy encounter, and I'm going to show you probably a really bad way of doing it, and then I'll show you a really good way of doing it. The boss will consistently cast a rain of fire around the room, and basically he'll cast it on the ranged. So the tank just needs to kite the boss in a circle around the room so that the ranged can use all of this room to not get locked in by this rain of fire. This is what I'm going to show you a really bad way of doing it, but again, you're going to know another consistency is have a tank tanking the adds off to the side, which do a stun on anyone near them. So watch out for that for the tank over there, as well as the boss will do a curse on anyone around him. He'll do a curse that will go out and it will reduce your healing by 100%. So instantly decurse the tanks, but realistically, you'll have one tank over here tanking the ads and one tank tanking the boss. Now we are moving to the back of the room where he was spawned, which is not a great place to drag the boss, honestly. We have to bring him down before we run out of room. Don't do this. Instead, do something like this. Drag the boss slowly towards any of the corners just around the room, and the ranged can just consistently move slightly. It's a lot easier to deal with things this way, and some people can actually just eat all of the damage if they have enough fire resistance, but realistically just burn the boss and slightly drag him around the room. The rain of fires are annoying, but they don't do a ridiculous amount of damage. As you can see, the ticks on Zeroji, actually you can't see them behind me, they're happening for 1,000 normally, but he's usually resisting quite a bit of it, so he's not actually taking very much damage. You should be able to bring the boss down pretty quickly. Eventually you won't even really have to move. You probably will have enough fire res and the boss will go down fast enough. Now there's two main strategies for Garr, and this might actually be the hardest fight in the raid right now. This boss has 4 ads, and you can CC them for an amount of time until the boss reaches a certain amount of health, and then they become enraged and are no longer CCable. What you want to do is, as a easy way, the dad way, which is what you're probably going to want to do in pugs, is actually just have the boss be tanked against a wall and then burn down all of the Firesworn ads slowly but surely. One by one, bring them down. As they get low, they explode. You'll see that they are going to get brought kind of inwards right here, which they shouldn't be. They should just be left out there. They will explode as they get low, and on top of that, once you bring them all down, then you can just burn the boss. But on top of that, there's another mechanic. You can see this little right there, that guy. All right, I was out of range of my fire resistance aura from my paladin because I got knocked and I got the slow on me. There's a slow, this debuff right here that makes you super slow. So I got knocked and got the slow, and I was not above the 226 fire resistance cap when I am far enough away from my paladin. That is my fault here, and so when I take fire damage, I'm instantly conflagged for 50,000 damage. Instant death for anyone that does this. But these magmakins, these little guys, will target a random player in the raid and charge at them and then explode. When they explode, it knocks everyone around you back and does fire damage. Again, just make sure you have enough fire resistance, and ideally in a future world, what we're gonna do is tank all of the ads pretty much on top of the boss and burn the boss. Slow and steady really wins the race on this fight. You're actually gonna see in this world first clear, this actually is Zeroji makes a pretty huge play. One of the off tanks, the off tank Snurk goes down, and then you're noticing that the main tank goes down also. Zeroji's gonna get aggro on 2 of these fire swarms and kite them around. If this didn't go down cleanly, everyone would have died, and this would have been a wipe, and this boss took way too long. So 3 of the ads are chasing him, and then a target dummy happens right here, and then they just keep focusing, burning the boss, and it goes down. So I would highly suggest for now, just separating the ads, CCing them, burning them down, and then going to the boss. Baron Geddon is an easy but kind of stressful encounter. There's a lot of moving parts. Now, what I would suggest is having a hunter pet pull the boss into the room you just defeated Garr, because it gives you enough room. Now you'll notice that the bombs go out. Baron Geddon does a bomb on a player, and that player needs to run away from the rest of the raid, or else they will explode, wiping everyone. But now Baron Geddon gives 3 bombs, and you'll notice everyone running in random directions when they all should run in a semi-similar direction, and they will explode, leaving this actual pool of magma on the ground. The boss will also leave his own pool of magma on the ground, you can see up there, after he does his AoE ability, which is an AoE ability that's kind of on a timer. And what it does is pulsate fire damage, and each individual pulse does more and more damage. So the melee need to run away from the boss when he's doing this, because the last pulses in original WoW ticked for 5,000. So I anticipate there were a lot more here. I played ranged on this fight. But just know, you can see all of the melee running away, and then he leaves that magma pool on the ground, and then the tank is just gonna kite him all around this room. Very, very simple. The main thing to worry is about people getting the debuff like I have right here, and I'm trying to run to Narnia, but there was respawns behind me, so I go into the other direction to Narnia. get knocked up into the air, make sure I don't pull anything. I have slow fall on, noob move, and then go back in and fight the boss. So everyone just needs to pretty much watch out for that actual explosion. If you get the debuff, that person did it too close to all of the range and we got hit for 2000 damage, but it doesn't actually wipe you instantly. That's like the big fear on this boss. Just keep kiting him around the room. You only need one tank, kite around the room, and the 3 people that get the bomb need to run out. There's going to be weak auras that just yell at you to run away, little girl. Shazzrah is another encounter where resistances can be helpful, but he does arcane damage. You can see this arcane explosion that he is doing around himself, and he also curses people with a curse that basically makes you take a ton more arcane damage, which means you'll almost get one shot or potentially get one shot by one of these arcane explosions. That's why I always suggest using a restorative potion. You can see this actual CD right here at 17 seconds. This is a restorative potion because worrying about other people decursing you is really scary, to be honest. And this was just better on this fight in general. Back in the day, as a melee, you could stay in on the boss and keep DPSing if you used a resto pot instead of a greater arcane protection potion. But the main mechanics of this boss are that he will teleport to a ranged camp. So you want 1, 2, or even 3 ranged camps, whatever your group prefers. It's actually pretty simple, but he will randomly teleport to someone in the raid. It actually doesn't even have to be ranged. He could teleport to one of the melees, and what he will do after this is leave an after image of himself in the original location he just was at, which will continue casting Arcane Explosion forever. So you can see he was teleported here where he's now still casting Arcane Explosion, but there is an after image of him casting it as well. What you want to do ideally is kite him around the room so you have as much room as humanly possible, going this way, then this way, so like back towards me and then back and forth. What we did, which is ridiculousness, but it worked, and you can see him there teleport right to one of the melees right on top of him. What we did was just kind of use the entire room. It is an awful way to do this in my brutal honest opinion, but it works. It's not really that intimidating. So as long as you have the room in the raid and enough DPS, which with world buffs you will, then you're gonna be fine. Make sure you get those decurses, and the boss also does put a magic deflect shield on himself. I was gonna say spell, but magic deflect shield, so whenever he does that, just make sure that gets dispelled. But on top of that, of course, have an off tank standing in one of the range camps. Again, look at us, we are there's the reflect magic, we are very spread out in a very awkward way, and we have used only 3 teleports to waste all of the inner sides of the room. It does not make sense to do it this way. Don't do it this way. And the core hounds in this raid respawn after 15 minutes. Very, very fast respawns. I anticipate this won't be a thing because they're not supposed to respawn after Magmadar, but either way, just use the room. We even got this ad to come in and still defeated the boss. It's pretty simple, but you have to utilize the room well. Golemagg is a 2-4 tank fight, and that is because you can use 2 tanks to tank both of his ads off on the side, like we consistently love doing, because if they are close to the boss, they are kind of enraged. You can see that their snouts are like red here. If they're close, then they will just get mad and do a lot more damage. The boss will put a debuff up on the tank, a stacking debuff on the tank that reduces his armor, and at 4 stacks you usually would want to switch the main tank of Golemagg, but I think you can just bubble off the stacks as a paladin. I know you can bubble off the stacks as paladin, and as horde, yeah, you can just do a tank swap, but you can just have the ads tanked off to the right or the left, wherever you want them, and then just burn the boss. You did also notice that this boss does summon like little meteors that come down, and you can actually don't watch the meteors falling from the sky, watch the circles on the ground. That's the only thing to really worry about, is dodge those circles on the ground so you don't get nuked. And you can see that debuff I was mentioning over here on all of the melee, because it's technically like a splash. It's called actually magma splash, and it hits everyone around him. That's why we have an off tank standing in the range camp. There's the meteors, just dodge those, and if the tank were to go down, the off tank would just pick him up and stand there. Again, you do need your fire resistance though on the tank, at least on this fight, because if you get hit with this magma splash, which is fire damage, and aren't at that fire res cap, you literally just get nuked and you get one shot. Each ad on Sulfuron Harbinger should die at the same time, and and there are 4 adds which each need to be tanked, but more importantly, they each need to be interrupted because these are all priests. As well, the boss does do an AoE stun, so if he is tanked within the adds, like with the adds, people will get AoE stunned, which means use a free action potion. There's also a stacking debuff that you can see right here that reduces your attack power. Basically, the entire raid, they have their attack power reduced all the time. What we did is just stack everything up and use a ton of AoE. Look at the casts going out and they get interrupted here, except for one of them just went through, but just AoE everything down, meaning that hunters, feral druids, rogues, but not really, mages, and definitely warlocks with their shadow bolt cleave will do ridiculous amounts of damage on this fight. It is effective damage, just make sure you are interrupting the entire time and bring everything down. If you need to, you can separate the adds from the boss, so tank the boss over to the right and tank the adds over here on the left behind this little follow notification, and then burn the adds first, then go fight the boss. But it's not really too intimidating in Season of Discovery anymore because of one major thing, and that is that everybody has cleave. So effective cleave is really huge here, which you can see the hunters doing really well because we were the only ones that chose to change our runes for AoE damage. But you can see we have 3 stacks of this debuff, reducing our armor and attack power right there. Then just make sure the interrupts go out and burn the boss. Interestingly enough, Majordomo is a similar situation where cleave can work out pretty well, except for there are some threat drops that you need to watch out for. So what we did is have all of the adds be tanked, the healers need to be interrupted, and you want to take out the elites first. So the healers will go down second, but you can do decently well effective cleave, although you kind of want to focus on the elites. Now you see this bubble that happened on the ranged, everyone stay in that because the damage that goes out from that explosion will be shared for everyone inside of it, and if you run away from it, everyone or the person that was targeted by it will die for sure. So you need to all stack up inside of that for effectively to soak it. Now the dark mendings, the heals get interrupted, and the elites are the things that go down. Cleave is again worth it here, I think, in my opinion, but realistically it's just like extra kind of not cheese damage. The adds don't heal up to full as you take them down. If they did, then it would be super useless cleave. But when you take down any of the adds, then you just move on to the next one, which you'll see in a second. They also get randomly, the boss will teleport someone to the center of the room right there, and it'll happen to me soon. And when he does that, you just need to run back to the stack, and it'll also happen to the tank that's tanking the main boss, and he will drop aggro. The boss will drop threat a lot, and it just needs to be re-taunted or re-picked up and brought back into the stack. So it's scary to cleave here. You'll actually notice I get threat quite a bit, but you see as people get teleported into that circle or into that middle, that's pretty much the big fear here. You actually do not need to defeat him at all. You don't end up defeating him to win the fight. So you just kill all of the adds, and then he will go into the middle, and you'll see someone that just wants to obviously run as fast as they can to check for the loot. Someone always does that in every raid, but just take out all of the adds and you'll be fine. On to Ragnaros. This fight is a little bit intimidating and probably the second hardest encounter in here right now, but the big thing on this fight is everyone wants to be 8 yards away from each other because the boss will do splash fire damage on people randomly and knock you back as well. He'll also drop threat on the tanks and do a knockback on melee, and when he does this threat drop, you'll need to run away as the melee. If not, your melee will just be turned around. The boss will literally just turn around and delete the melee. So have your tank and off tank fighting for threat, standing on top of each other, and then you see I got knocked back there, and everyone else will be able to kind of be spread around the entire room. I'll show you another POV in a second. If you're a hunter, it is awful to trap this fight, like god awful. You need to be super close. The only position we really got that worked was here or like somewhere over here so that you could trap the very center of his hitbox. Hunters feel pretty terrible on this fight, but either way, as long as the melee keep moving out when they are called for and the tanks keep fighting for threat, you're going to be fine and people don't stack up. Here's another POV from Zeroji over here on Notice. You can see it from another perspective, but essentially people are spread out around the room, and then when the boss hits 50%, he will force submerge which will spawn adds. Here we go. It's happening right here. He will submerge, spawning these adds. It's bugged, so you can still see the boss, but he should be underneath the water. Ignore that. Everyone stack up over here, drop frost traps, and tank the adds, have them be picked up, and then move all of your ranged or casters away from the adds as you AoE them down, because they do an AoE mana burn. So if you are near them, you will lose all of your mana. And when the adds die, they suck everyone near them into their like little position that they died and drop a flame on the ground. You can see it happening right here. Yeah, happening right there. It just consistently happens as the adds go down. But if you take them out easily, stack them all up, frost trap, and nuke them with AoE, then you'll be golden. Then the boss comes back up from his submerge phase, and you might have to deal with another submerge, but it is not a forced submerge. 50% is a forced submerge, and if your DPS is low, you won't have to deal with another submerge. And just keep pumping the boss down. Again, make sure you have that fire res. It's super necessary, but just keep pumping the boss down. And the scariest thing is pretty much for the melee to just get whomped. It's always been the scariest thing on this fight. Just run out and run back in, or try to, this is what you used to do, stay at max melee range as melee, like a literal as far as you possibly can, and he should not turn around and one-shot you. He should stay on the off tank at that position, and then towards the end he will start spawning more Sons of Flame, and you'll notice them right here, and they will just move around. You can just CC them or have a tank pick them up like an off tank, and then you just still just burn the boss. But do not worry about those other Sons of Flame. They are not that intimidating. Just burn the boss and bring him down. GG, you have defeated what is originally the last boss in Molten Core. But we have one more, the secret extra boss, as we see the Hydraxian firefighters now surround the room. And you will also notice Duke Hydraxis has spawned in the room. Now, summoning this final boss has been apparently bugged. Originally, what you need is the Exalted Hydraxian Waterlord's trinket or item that turns you into a water elemental yourself, allowing you to talk to Duke Hydraxis to start an RP event. But there's other triggers to allow you to get the RP event, and I'm not 100% sure what it is. I know that a Blizzard GM hopped into Joker's raid to help this go down, to help them be able to initiate this, so I think the bug of this will be fixed. Now, over time, this boss will gain mana. You're seeing him slowly gain mana, and on the first kills, this was potentially bugged because once he reaches 1,000 mana, the boss will enrage, which is this giant spicy meatball called the actual literal Molten Core. And these Hydraxian firefighters are trying to keep it cooled down. They're trying to cool down the core, but fire elemental adds will spawn throughout the raid, and they will go and attack these firefighters, these water elementals. Your job is to protect the fire elementals or water elementals. That's literally your main job. Burn the boss while protecting the water elementals. The boss will also put 2 debuffs on random players, Heart of Ash and Heart of Cinders, and those players need to run to each other and group up so that it drops the debuff. But if you don't do that, you just get this consistent blast wave around your character, which for now at least you can take outside of the raid, even into Orgrimmar, and do something like this. There is also a kind of, you'll see it right here come down, a meteor that comes down. It's obvious, it's slow, dodge it or else you'll die. That should be an easy thing to dodge. It should theoretically be easy to dodge, but you also see a water elemental go down right over here. But now we realize we really need to keep these water Ellies up because the boss is gaining energy faster, and as the boss eventually, when he reaches max energy, as we only have 1 water Ellie up, and as the boss starts getting lower, he will start pulsating damage, like an earthquake damage. Beautiful trap. I love that trap. He will start pulsating damage with an earthquake ability, but as he gets enraged, as we'll go all the way towards the end, because this boss, realistically, the mechanics weren't too bad early on. There's just a lot of raid-wide damage from this pulsate, but when it reaches 100 energy or 1,000, it is supposed to enrage. So you'll need to pretty much stack up, use raid CDs and burn it. But the real way to defeat this Molten Core is going to be to protect those water elementals. I think when it is fixed, which the hotfix should should potentially be in already. You will just need to hard focus on saving the firefighters instead of burning the boss down, which then also did end up dropping a binding. So you can get legendaries and extra loot from this boss. There is a ton of loot that drops in this raid, which is really, really nice. And the raid itself was really fun in my opinion. Although the mechanics of needing that fire res cap 226 for heat level 3 is not the best, in my opinion. You have to take off a lot of your DPS gear to hit the fire res cap, even in full BIS, but what you'll end up doing is most likely just defeating the raid on heat level 2, because I don't think you get any extra loot for heat level 3. The only real changes are you get that final boss right here that you saw, Molten Core, and you get the cosmetic Molten versions of weapons that has like a flame on it. They're not better, they just have a flame on it. So you get a little extra loot, but it might not be worth it for most guilds to clear it on heat level 3, at least for the first few weeks. But that is Molten Core, the new Molten Core. Kind of similar to Season of Mastery if you realize it, but I mean, who's saying that? Who knows? And if you like this guide or want any more coverage of Season of Discovery Phase 4 or beyond, of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will have some class guides coming soon, especially Hunter class guides, because in that run, I was, of course, rank 1 DPS in the whole world. It didn't matter. Most people weren't booned. I unbooned a couple fights and I AoE'd a lot, and this has already been beaten, but whatever. It was a fun time and I enjoyed the race, but I think most people should just do it on heat level 2 and have that 96 fire res, because it's a lot easier to hit that than hitting 226 fire res.